Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin with a roll call. Alderman J.R. Gorham. Thank you. Alderman Joe Penix. Thank you. Alderman Bill Apple.
Here.
Thank you. Alderman Chris Thompson.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am Mayor Dawn Morgan. Curtis, would you like to indicate the staff that are present?
I'm just here. We have Chief Tim Summers, Police Department, Captain Tilly of the Police Department, Catherine Garner, Community Development Director, Franz Ader, Finance Director, Scott Alderman, Fire Chief, Dorn Maltba, Public Services Director, Crystal Tanner, HR Director, Will May, Park Maintenance Superintendent, and Ed Powell, Town Attorney, and Keith Hooker, Town Clerk.
Thank you.
And also Adam Hutchins and Matthias Silva from the IT Department. And I think that's all.
Okay, we'll begin this evening with an invocation by Reverend Victoria Lasley. She is the chaplain for Well Care Hospice. And we need to make sure your microphone is on.
It's on.
Perfect.
Please join me in prayer. Gracious God, our Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer of all, I come before you this evening with those gathered around me here physically and those virtually to ask that your presence be felt here amongst us all. Be with each one of us as we listen to one another and speak about all the matters that are important to each of us. May all that is said and heard be received with grace and love. As we approach this new school year, may our students, faculty, and staff members be covered with your protection each and every day. We also ask that you continue to provide protection and care for all of the first responders who serve this community each and every day. May this board be blessed. May this community be blessed with your love. Amen.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right. So we have several public hearing items tonight. When an item is denoted as a public hearing, persons attending shall be permitted to address the Board of Aldermen regarding the item under consideration, those in favor speaking first and those against speaking second. Proponents and opponents shall each be given 20 minutes of time to speak. And the mayor may divide the time between the various speakers. The opponent similarly may have 20 minutes to speak. And then there's an opportunity for rebuttal. If the proponents exercise the option for rebuttal, then the opponents will also have 5 minutes for rebuttal. Those are the standard rules for our public hearings. They're printed on the agenda and available on the Town of Kernersville website. So we have as our first public hearing, item 1A. It's on the Kernersville Development Plan. Curtis Swisher, agent for the Town of Kernersville, for an amendment to the Kernersville Development Plan to amend the land use plan from medium density residential to mixed use for property located at 327 East Bodenhammer Street, being a total of 0.42 plus or minus acres, zoning docket KDP 60. That is related to public hearing 1B, which is a rezoning, zoning docket K 801, zoning docket K 801, a general use rezoning from RS7 to pedestrian business for property located at 327 East Bodenhammer Street. So they'll be presented together, and then we'll hold separate votes. All right, at this time, I'll introduce our Community Development Director, Catherine Garner.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. The two cases before you tonight, KDP 60 and K801, are related to property off of Bodenhammer Street. First, the land use plan amendment. The requested amendment is from medium density residential to mixed use. This affects only a portion of the property, as these two parcels were combined by deed, and they have two different land use plan designations. So you can see the site fronting on Bodenhammer is purple. That's already mixed use. And then the portion that was combined that fronts on Patterson Street was designated as medium density residential. And so the request is to make it all mixed use now that the property has been combined. Staff is recommending the amendment. Mixed use as defined is established to accommodate a variety of uses, which may range from residential, commercial, office, and industrial uses, and has been established to promote redevelopment of downtown and the Bodenhammer Street area. The portion of the property under consideration is currently vacant and could still be developed for housing under the proposed mixed use designation and with the rezoning that's proposed next. Planning Board and staff both recommend approval of the resolution in the staff report to change the designation from medium density to mixed use. This was heard at the July Planning Board meeting, and it was unanimous of members present. The rezoning case, K801, is a general use rezoning, so there is no associated site plan. The entire parcel is proposed to be rezoned from RS7 to pedestrian business. All pedestrian business uses would apply. The current zoning for both is residential single family, but the requested zoning is pedestrian business, and there is pedestrian business immediately adjacent to this site as well as other business zoning districts. The land use plan, you just heard that case, as currently it is a split designation in the land use plan. With the general use rezoning, all of the pedestrian business uses must be considered, and it is located within the Highway Corridor Overlay District, which does also restrict some uses. So in the staff report, we went ahead and marked through the uses that would not be permitted in the Highway Corridor Overlay. So they've been stricken from the table. After the adoption of the overlay districts and without plans to widen Bodenhammer Street, the town has approved numerous general use rezonings to promote redevelopment along Bodenhammer Street. Additionally, the pedestrian business zoning district has a 40-foot building setback requirement for the adjacent RS7 zoning district. That would affect primarily the portion of the lot in the rear, as it is not currently developed. But if the front along Bodenhammer were to be redeveloped, then the 40-foot setback would apply, as the parcel in the corner is zoned residential single family. So it does significantly limit the potential of development on the site unless the remaining residentially zoned properties on this block are also rezoned to commercial. Planning Board and staff's recommendation in this case is recommending approval to amend the zoning ordinance from RS7 to pedestrian business, finding that the development plan and the land use plan recommend redevelopment and reuse of properties in the greater downtown area. The Highway Corridor Overlay District has enhanced building and site design standards, as well as the pedestrian business zoning district being conducive to adaptive reuse of existing structures or infill projects. Again, a reminder, general use versus conditional use. We see a lot of conditional use. General use does not require a prepared site plan, and all uses must be considered, and it doesn't allow for conditions to be applied. This was heard at the July Planning Board meeting with all members voting present as well, or voting yes.
Thank you, Ms. Garner. This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who'd like to speak about the development plan proposal or the rezoning? I have Ezra Purdue signed up to speak. At this time, I'll recognize Ezra Purdue. Mr. Purdue, you can come up to the podium so that we can all hear you. Mr. Powell will show you there's a microphone there at the podium that you can speak into.
Yeah, I'm here for you, and I'm in support of this rezoning and everything. And last time I was here, I talked about Aldine and Shirley Hardy owners both sides of that property and everything. So I called, and the people that bought the property and everything talked with them and everything, and they understood everything now, and they are still for the rezoning. That'll be all I got to say on it. But if you have any questions, y'all can get in touch with Aldine and Shirley, and they can.
Okay, and you're in support of the rezoning?
Yeah, I'm for rezoning and everything.
Okay.
Okay, well, talk
Thank
to y'all
you.
later.
Thank you for coming to speak with us tonight. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of this rezoning? Now I'd like to ask to see if there's anyone here who'd like to speak in opposition to this rezoning. I need to check, Adam, has anyone called in on this rezoning?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. There's no one who's called in to speak in favor or against, and we've had a great comment from Mr. Perdue. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this zoning case in favor or against it? Seeing nobody else here to speak on this zoning case, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Mr. Gorham or Mr. Penix, do you have any questions? Mr. Apple, do you have any questions of staff?
No, ma'am, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do you have any questions of staff?
I have no questions. I would motion to approve.
Okay, the first vote we will take is on the development plan. Is this a motion to adopt the development plan?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second by Alderman Penix. We'll do a roll call vote. If you could indicate if you're in favor or opposed. Mr. Gorham? In favor. Thank you. Mr. Penix? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor. Thank you.
Thank you. That is for KDP 60. The next is the rezoning. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
I move it approved.
Okay, I have a motion for approval from Mr. Penix. I have a second from Mr. Apple. We'll again do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham votes in favor. Mr. Penix?
Approval.
In favor. Mr. Apple?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor.
Thank you. All right, is there anything more on this before we move on to the next public hearing, Mr. Swisher? Okay, we will move on to item C. It is a public hearing, a rezoning, zoning docket K802. It is a single-phase conditional use rezoning from RS20 to LIC, which is limited industrial conditional use, for property located just south of the intersection of North Main Street and Flynwood Drive, containing a total of 23.07 plus or minus acres, with the requested uses offices, miscellaneous, professional office, services, business A, and manufacturing A. And again, this is zoning docket K802. I have two individuals signed up to speak, and we have a presentation by our staff. I'll begin by recognizing Ms. Catherine Garner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our next case is K802, Holt Environmentals. Holt Environments. This is on North Main Street and Flynwood Drive. The petitioner is Michael Criskillo. He's the agent for the owners. The proposed zoning amendment is from residential single family to limited industrial conditional use, single phase. The uses, as mentioned, office, miscellaneous, professional office, business services A, and manufacturing A. The application covers just over 23 acres, 23.07 acres of the total tract that's for sale. It is located within the highway corridor overlay, and it's surrounded by a bunch of different types of zoning districts. We've got manufactured housing, residential single-family, limited business, and residential single-family quadruplex. So there's quite a lot of zoning districts, different zoning districts out there on North Main Street. The proposed site improvements include a new 237,000 square foot office and light manufacturing and storage space. The applicant has proposed to phase the construction of the building so that he's ready to expand, but the extent shown would be at full build out. Enhanced architectural features would be required due to the overlay district along North Main Street and Flynwood Drive, both with limited industrial zoning district having architectural standards and the highway corridor overlay district. He is proposing a landscape buffer at the back to lessen the visual impact to the adjacent residential properties. That does include a berm at the back of the property, and then meeting the landscaping and buffer standards on the remaining perimeter property lines. Stormwater will be collected and treated by an on-site retention pond that you see on the left-hand side of the building. The entrance to the site will be off of North Main Street. NCDOT is going to require turn lanes. The exact dimensions and which ones will be worked out at the time of construction document phase, but it has been noted that they are required and will be reviewed and approved by NCDOT. Emergency access would be available to Flynwood Drive only. We have a condition, or staff has proposed a condition that there would be a gate there that had a Knox box or some other fire department access in case of emergency. Flynwood Drive, according to DOT, was going to need significant amount of improvement, and then staff was very concerned about the impact of more commercial and industrial traffic on the residential neighborhoods off of Flynwood, which really drove the entrance to North Main Street. The building elevations shown are renderings of what the applicant is looking at, and then full construction details would be required at construction document submittal to conform to our overlay standards, but they're looking at an office space in the front with the warehouse space to the back. The land use plan is already designated as business support. It is intended to accommodate a wider variety of office, corporate park, warehouse, flex space, light industrial, retail, hotel, and related uses. There are standards for limited screened outdoor storage and loading areas, enhanced front facades, a unified landscaping, lighting, and signage plan, all of which he either has and meets now or will have at the time of construction document submittal with the proposed conditions. This is a less intensive industrial use and does meet the intent of the business support land use classification, and it meets the town's vision for capitalizing on the future Macy Grove Road extension for future office, warehousing, and commercial uses. Planning Board and staff are recommending approval of the request to rezone the property, in this case from RS20 to limited industrial conditional use, finding that the rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan and being reasonable and in the public interest because the conditional use district allows the specific site plan to be considered to ameliorate impacts to adjoining properties. It is promoting economic development, and it is consistent with the land use plan and is an appropriate use in the business support use classification. We also recommend approval of the site plan subject to the conditions as presented. This was at the July Planning Board meeting with all members voting in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Garner. All right, I have Mike Criscola and Vincent Townsend signed up to speak. I'd like to recognize Mr. Criscola at this time. So welcome to our meeting. And I was wondering, how much time would you like versus how much time for Mr. Townsend?
I think I'll probably take no more than 10 minutes, and Vince probably 5.
Okay, then we'll just run the clock down from
Sure.
20, and I'll call to see if there's any other people who'd like to speak in favor when you are done.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Catherine, Anna. Thank you, gentlemen. What I'll be doing is presenting an overview.
And if I can just
Yeah.
stop you there, with the 2 aldermen not here, it's important we hear you through the microphone as
Yes.
well, so you may have to put it higher up with your
Can I
height.
do that? Okay, so
got it.
my name is Mike Criscolo. I am the owner and president of Holt Environments. I'm going to present to you our business model and what we do, and explain how our request for rezoning meets the requirements that you guys have outlined. I'll also show you an animation of the proposed building. It's a conceptual building, but it also takes into account all the requirements of the HCOD. So if you could pop to the first slide. Our company essentially designs and builds marketing environments for businesses, universities, museums. We conceptually design them through digital processes, and then we physically build them in our facility, and then we install them and we maintain them. Predominantly, we work with corporations that are going to trade shows and events. They host annual meetings and sales events and HR events, and we work with museums and universities predominantly. If you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a little bit about our company. Our mission is to become the premier event marketing agency in the southeastern United States. We were founded in 1975 by a gentleman named Jim Hotelling. He was an agency fella. He ran his business, and he did print advertising and commercial TV commercials, and then I purchased the business from him in 2006, and there were 12 employees. We now have 50 plus employees. We started at about $2 million in revenue when I purchased the business, and we are averaging about $15 million in revenue and expect to grow that to $20 to $25 million in revenue over the next 5 to 10 years. Our goals as a company are to be the most widely respected marketing agency in the region, a highly regarded design and build agency, an organization dedicated to superior customer satisfaction, one of the best places to work in North Carolina, and an organization that gives back to its community. We have been renting buildings for the last 16 years since I've owned it, and this is a very important step for us to own a facility and to build it the way that we like, because that's what we do, is build homes and for companies and the like. So thank you, Catherine. Next slide. Okay, so why Kernersville? As I mentioned, we have 50 plus employees, 15 of which are based within probably 10 miles of this facility here. Our employees are many of them first-time home buyers, and they're looking to purchase reasonably priced homes in a nice, safe community. We love that Kernersville has its own police force, fire and rescue, and fire and rescue squads. It's got a great, diverse, well-educated population, great for recruiting, and it's apparent I live in Oak Ridge, it's apparent that Kernersville is making very good decisions. Its leadership is guiding towards a beautiful, growing community. And I spend most of my time here. I just dropped my dog off at Doggone Fun. Next slide, please. This is a picture of our team. Next slide. Some of the people that work for us. Gemma is our controller, head of finance, and sits on our leadership team. The slide to the right, the second slide, top to the right. Those are all graduates of Glenn High School. Megan is getting married this weekend. Doug Jones is a resident. He was a resident of the mobile homes behind the land that we're looking at, and the rest of the folks here are all representatives of our company. Great people, start of our company, foundation of our company. Next slide. These are our core values: strength of character, skill, creativity, communication, and pride in work. Some statistics about our company: average salary is about $65,000. The average starting wage is $20 an hour. We provide 401k with a company match, healthcare, profit sharing on top of the 401k, vacation, and paid holidays. So the point of that, I mentioned this, is very highly educated folks, working hard, doing the right things, and will be good representatives and members of your community. Here are some of our clients, and I figured the next few set of slides will just show you what we do so you can get an understanding, because it's a very different type of business. It's a niche business. It's hard to understand exactly what we do. So here is a client, Thermo Fisher Scientific, big company. We've been managing their account through Banner Pharma Caps, which used to be in Greensboro, DSM Pharmaceuticals in Greenville, North Carolina, Patio, which moved from Canada to Durham. All of these companies were rolled up and purchased by Thermo Fisher Scientific. We, as a small company, were one of a handful of companies that have maintained a relationship with this company through all those acquisitions, and we work with them globally to support them. We designed this exhibit. It was built in our facility, shipped on a boat over to Frankfurt and Madrid and Barcelona. We've done this for 12 years, and we build it, send it there. Our guys install it in Europe and bring it back each year and redesign it. So thank you. That's another example of a previous year of the same company. Another example, this is their North American exhibit. We help them with sales meetings. So this is an internal sales meeting. So you imagine a convention. We built the branding, graphics. We help with the AV and help orchestrate the whole event. Snap One is a company based in Charlotte. This is a trade show exhibit that showcases all of their exhibits, all of their products. I'm sorry. Some of what we do, a lot of representation of messaging is done through LED panels. So we are unfortunately having to import them because they're made overseas, but we are inventorying these and installing them all over the area, and it's part of our business as well. Small part, but growing. More sales meetings. Gilbarco, you may be familiar with them. Tanger Outlets, we do their sales meetings. We also, in the next slide, we helped with their grand openings, and we create promotional engagement spaces for them at their grand openings. And we built all this and travel with them around the United States. So you can kind of slide through the next slides. That keep going. This was an event. I'm sorry, that's Nathan Hatch, the president of Wake Forest, who just retired. We created all the graphics and branded and designed the event and produced it in combination with one of our partners here in Greensboro or in the area. We also do mobile marketing, and that may be a part of what we do more going forward, is creating mobile marketing vehicles.
There's about 11 minutes left in the hearing.
Okay, yeah, sorry. These are some interior projects. This is Ecolabs, University of Greensboro, University of North Carolina, Piscataville. We help with their rebranding efforts and building Inmar Innovation Lab in Winston, Lenovo in Durham, and Thermo Fisher. And then the last couple slides, UNCG again. The last couple slides, Winston State. And these are the Cobain Children's Museum down in High Point. We help design and build several aspects of the museum and the new arena in High Point. So that's my presentation. I'll pause for any questions, or we can go right into
questions a little bit at the end. And if you're done,
sorry.
I'll recognize Mr. Townsend.
Okay, I was just going to show the animation. Okay. Yep.
All right.
And this is a conceptual animation of the building. The front section is 20,000 square feet. The back section is 150,000 square feet with a potential expansion pad of 50,000 square feet. We've taken into account the HCOD requirements for architectural elements and buffers. This is the back side of the facility. Drive up docks, some yard boxes. Sorry, this is a little slower than. This is the side that will face the back of the mobile home community. This is grass areas, the expansion area. You can slide that forward a little bit if you want. I don't remember being this slow. And you can kind of get a front view. There's a outdoor patio that will sit near the kitchen. Inside of the building will be a virtual reality room that's also part of what we do. So there's a little bit of digital, a lot of physical to what we do. So that is my portion of the presentation. I will hand, Vince is here to discuss any technical elements of the civil engineering. He's from Green Mountain Engineering and is handling the civil for our project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vince Townsend, 1A Wendy Court, Greensboro. I really don't have anything to add to that. I'm just here to provide technical support if you have any technical questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, is there anyone else who's here to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak in opposition? Mr. Gorham and Mr. Penix, do you have any questions of staff or of our speakers? Okay, Mr. Apple, do you have any questions of staff or of our speakers?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to just emphasize a couple of aspects of the plan as I understand it. The buffer zone to the west of the proposed project, I believe it requires this is a 20-foot buffer zone with a 3-foot berm. Is that correct?
Ms. Garner's checking.
Okay, thank you. We've talked a lot about the north side and the buffer back there, but just want to be sure, since there are a number of mobile homes to the west. Excuse me. Yeah. I'm sorry. I believe that would be to the east. Forgive me. The east side, not the west. Forgive me.
Mayor Pro Tem, the east side would be, that's the North Main Street side?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. They're proposing the 40-foot type 4 buffer yard to the property that's on the corner that is a residential property there at the corner of North Main and Flynwood. And then at the back on the west side, adjacent to the mobile home park, that is a 40-foot type 4 buffer yard with a 6-foot berm because of the loading docks.
Yes. Yes. Understood. Thank you. And the other is, I just want to reemphasize for purposes of the hearing and the public that it is a condition on the rezoning that truck traffic will be routed around the front and to the back of the building as opposed to entering on Flynwood. You said, I think that there would be, Ms. Garner, I think you said that there would be a Knox box there or something similar for fire protection, but routine trucking traffic will not be going down Flynwood as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the condition as we've proposed it in line with our concerns and DOT's concerns about Flynwood Drive.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. Mr. Thompson?
No, ma'am, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I would move the approval. Mayor?
Yes?
I'll second.
Okay. So Mayor Pro Tem Apple has moved approval of the rezoning and the site plan with the conditions as recommended by staff. I have a second by Alderman Thompson. I'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Mr. Gorham. Alderman Gorham, how do you vote? Thank you. Alderman Penix? Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Apple?
In favor?
Thank you. Alderman
Thank you.
Thompson?
In favor, and I'd like to commend the petitioner for seeing the value of having his business in Kernersville. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. When do you expect to begin the project? Fantastic. We look forward to seeing it built. Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor, if I may add one
Go.
comment along the lines of what Alderman Thompson added. The petitioner is moving not only its production facility here, but is moving its corporate headquarters here. And that, I think, is sort of a new development for Kernersville that we'd certainly love to see more of. And this is a very clean industry that is growing by leaps and bounds. And I think we're just very flattered that Kernersville would be their chosen location for both of those operations. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. All right, congratulations. All right, Mr. Swisher, is there anything else we need to do on this matter before we move on? All right, we are to item D, which is a public hearing on a text amendment. Curtis Swisher, agent for the town of Kernersville, for a proposed zoning text amendment to the UDO, amending Chapter B, Article 2-1.6 F3B to modify allowable departures from overlay district standards through conditional zoning district petitions. Zoning docket KT 272. Ms. Garner has a presentation, and I'll recognize her at this time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. KT 272 is buried way down in the UDO with that code reference, but this is a proposed modification to clarify allowable departures from the overlay district standards when conditional district petitions are brought forward. The General Assembly updated state statutes with 160D and made it legally permissible to tailor development standards through a conditional use district. We do that often, but according to the legislation, it is not legally permissible to allow uses that would otherwise be restricted within the conventional district or overlay district. So if an applicant is requesting a rezoning, if it's not permitted in that zoning district outright, they can't get that use approved through the conditional use. It's not a loophole anymore. So the amendment just strikes "and uses" from the paragraph. So they may request departure from the standards, but they must comply with the use regulations of the zoning district that they're proposing to rezone to. This was heard at the July Planning Board meeting. Planning Board and staff recommend approval of the text amendment as presented.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board in favor? Is there anyone who'd like to address the board in opposition? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Do I have a motion?
Making a motion to approve the text amendment as presented by the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Gorham. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Penix. I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham? Thank you, Mr. Penix. Thank you, Mr. Apple.
In favor?
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor.
Thank you. All right, passes unanimously. That brings us to our public session. The first item is speakers from the floor. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board on an item or issue or concern that is not included on this agenda? Seeing no one in person, Mr. Hutchins, is there anyone who's called in
No, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, seeing none, we will move on to item B, which is consideration of an ordinance to allow the possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages on certain town properties. And the proposed ordinance is an ordinance allowing alcohol possession and consumption on certain town easements and rights of way. I believe Mr. Swish, our town manager, has a presentation.
Madam Mayor, you have in your packet the ordinance, the proposed ordinance. I will say that currently we already allow alcohol on town property with the 3 exemptions that are in the ordinance. The first of those being any such property which is leased by the town on a minimum of a 1-year basis to another organization. Number 2 is on any town easement or right of way, and we've clarified it to be excluding streets because there's been some debate whether or not a street is really a easement or right of way. So it's excluding streets that are adjacent to a restaurant or bar where patrons of such restaurant or bar may possess or consume alcoholic beverages purchased from the same restaurant or bar. Any such easement or right of way shall be considered to be closed to the public during the hours of operation of the adjacent restaurant or bar. And the third exception is special events in certain locations as specified in Section 5-5 of the Town of Kernersville Code of Ordinances. So is what we're proposing is that number 2 in those list of exemptions is temporary, and it will expire when the state of emergency of the governor expires, which is August the 15th. Our current regulations allow it as long as the state of emergency is in effect. So when that state of emergency is lifted, then it will not apply. I know we have one location in town that we would have to go tell them you need to move your chairs, tables, and so forth out of the right of way. Have another establishment that uses the town easement periodically, not very often. They park a food truck in it, serve food from it, but folks will go out of the brewery out into that easement to get food off the food truck. So they would no longer be able to do that. The other 2 exemptions would stay in place. They wouldn't go away, but that exemption in itself will. So we, knowing that we will not have another board meeting before it expires, we thought it's a good idea to bring it to the board, see if you want to change it, make it permanent. If you don't, then we won't make it permanent, and we'll tell those folks, hey, you can't use the town right of way or easements. Very few places in town where this will apply. I've been sitting here trying to think of where it will, and I think maybe 3 places. 2 of them are currently using it, and there may be one more because the town doesn't have many rights of ways or easements that are currently or in the future will be next to a restaurant or bar just because of the way it's zoned. Mayor Pro Tem Apple asked at the last meeting about special alcohol district. I forget the exact terminology for it. This is not that. This only allows it in those rights of ways or easements. There is a provision, it's exemption number 3 in here, to allow alcohol at events downtown by approval of the board. It has to come to the board for that, meaning that, the special alcohol district allows it in that area all of the time without approval by the board. We don't have that. Any event downtown that serves alcohol has to be in a certain area, and it has to be approved by the Board of Aldermen. That will not change. All that we're asking is, do you want to or do you not want to make it permanent to allow it in the easements and rights of way? Mayor Pro Tem Apple also asked about putting a time limit on it, temporary, have it for a year or whatever. My advice would be probably to not do that, because then when you do it, it kind of looks like you intend to definitely do it for that 1 year. My advice would be to leave it open-ended. If something comes up and it's not working the way the board feels that it should work, you can simply go in and change ordinance 1 month and take that out, and then it goes back to where it's not allowed. So I think if you say we're going to allow it for a year or 2 years or whatever, then the folks that own a restaurant or a bar would think that it's definitely going to be allowed in place. I think you just go like it is, and if it's not working, then you go back and change ordinance, because it is the town property. I mean, you can certainly go back and change it and say, hey, no, you can't do this. So that's all I have on it. Again, item exemption 1 and exemption 3 will not change. The only change would be there with exemption 2. If you don't allow it, then we need to just let those folks know by the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. Swisher. Mayor Pro Tem Apple, did you have any questions or comments?
I do, Madam Mayor. I want to be really sure. First of all, I certainly support Mr. Swisher's recommendation as to the not limiting it or not establishing a 1-year extension. I think that's well thought out, and Curtis, I appreciate it very much, the thought you've given it. I do want to be explicit, however, that there's nothing in the action that we're taking tonight that would allow any restaurant or bar to make a private decision to close a public street without obtaining a permit from the town in advance. Is that, we're not doing that in this action, are we?
No, sir. They would, nothing in here and nothing that we currently have in any ordinance allows them to close a public street without approval of the town first.
Okay. I just want to be sure that there's no misunderstanding on the part of the public, because we've had some issues about that within the last 6 or 8 months. And I want to be sure that there's no implied, interpretations of what we're doing tonight. It will not expand that. That's all I have, Madam.
Yeah, and that is correct. It will not expand that and allow that.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I had.
You're welcome. Mr. Gorham, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have one. Has there been any issues or concerns the way we're doing it right now? Have any problems come about where it's been operated to this point?
No, there's been no issues, no concerns. The only 2 right now that are doing it are Follies on North Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
On the right as you're going north, and then KBC every now and then. They're the ones that do it in the back every now and then.
Right.
And Follies uses the easement that is right beside the building. And it's kind of good, bad for him. It's good that he can put those tables out and have outdoor dining. It's bad that it kind of prohibits everybody from getting to his parking lot back there. But
right.
We've not had any issues. They've got it blocked off where no one can enter it and go in and hit someone that's out there or whatever. So everything so far to this point has worked fine. I don't think we've had any issues call in. Yeah, none from the police department either. So
okay,
it's worked well, and it's been probably a little over a year now that we've been allowing it, and so it's worked well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Penix, do you have any questions or comments? Thank you. Mr. Thompson, did you have any questions or comments?
No and yes. I don't have a lot to say, but I think it's been a long time coming that we've got to this point, and I think it's that we're doing a good service to the businesses downtown. I know that there's only a couple that are putting this in place right now, but I think as this gets more widespread and people see that it's a benefit to them, the restaurants downtown, that I think it will be more widely used, and I think it's great. Thank you, Curtis, for your homework.
Thank you. All right, I'll do, first I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I've got a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second by Alderman J.R. Gorham. And we'll again do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor?
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor. Thank you.
You. All right, it is unanimous. And it would go into effect immediately, right, Curtis? So there will be no gap between the governor
Yes, ma'am.
ending the state of emergency and this taking effect.
Correct.
All right. So we are to item 2C, which is an ordinance for budget amendment 1 for fiscal year 2022 to 2023. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, you have in your packet the memo from Franz Ader to myself about the budget amendment. I'm not going to cover everything in there. It was a pretty large budget amendment. It's like I told the board, though, it's a little over $6 million. That doesn't mean that we're taking an additional $6 million out of our general fund balance. It's what the majority of this, probably 95%, maybe 98%, are expenditures that were budgeted in 21-22. They were budgeted, but they have yet to be spent. So all of that money basically was not spent. It stayed in our general fund balance. We've ordered the equipment or whatever it might be, and is coming in this fiscal year, 22-23. So we have to carry that money over and pay for it in this fiscal year. As I told the board at the last meeting, kind of what it does is it really makes your general fund balance one year, it makes it look like you saved a lot of money, and then the next year it makes it look like you spent a lot more money than you were supposed to. But that's just the way it is right now. It's always kind of been that way. Right now, with the difficulty in getting equipment and vehicles and contractors and all of that, it's even worse. But I'll cover some of the larger items to give you an idea of what's in here. Probably the largest department with the largest amendment was Parks and Recreation. We had carried over $2.4 million for the renovations of Civitan Park, $1 million, the grant money that the state gave us for land purchase. We also carried that over to this upcoming or the current fiscal year that we're in. And then roughly $400,000, also a grant from the state for land purchase that was in last fiscal year that we need to carry over. The street department, we've got about $570,000 that we're carrying over for resurfacing. That's money that's coming from city county utilities to resurface these streets where they're doing pipe bursting. Got about $450,000 for the Cherry Street parking lot. We've got a bucket truck that was in the budget last year that was ordered that's not gotten here yet. It's $140,000. And then we've got $200,000 in grant money that the board voted to use for resurfacing as well. The other two departments had some pretty large carryovers. Fire department, we've got $775,000 in a pumper truck. Got $146,000 in truck renovation. They had a lot of department supplies and equipment that was ordered that did not come in. About $160,000 that didn't come in. There is one in here that was not budgeted that we're having to do. Is bay doors at Station 41. Those doors were damaged and not working, so we got to do a budget amendment for those also. And then really the last one, police department had about $460,000 carried over in that department for the range building that was approved in fiscal year 21-22. And then they had about $200,000, various equipment, vehicles, things like that were ordered. They're on their way. Hopefully they'll be here in 22-23. But we had to carry that money over. So that's the bulk of it. We did have some revenue as well. Had the $560,000 from CCUC. We had $790,000 for the Brookford Sewer, and then about $765,000 for the Civitan Park that also was carried over. So when everything washed out with the expenses and the revenues, it was a net of about $6.2 million that will be appropriating from fund balance in fiscal year 22-23 to match up the carryover items. Be glad to answer any questions if you've got some about a particular item there in expenditures or revenues if I didn't cover it, or if I did cover it and you need more explanation, I'd be glad to go back over it.
Thank you for your presentation, Curtis, and your hard work on the budget. And for the department heads, it's discouraging right now. So you order things so far in advance that are so well planned and they take so long to come in for the town use. So we thank you for your patience and follow up to help us continue to meet our high accounting standards. The hard thing about a community is you've got to fund it somehow, and a main source of funding is the property taxes, but the fire services, the rescue services, the police services, the sanitation services. And while there's an extra fee for some of it, it's really handy to be able to put your yard waste out in the front yard, for limb pickup, for your yard carts, for your recycling curbside, for all the services that we have here in Kernersville, Parks and Rec, the IT support that allows citizens to get information about the town from the comfort of their homes or businesses, with our website and our social media. So the roads and the road improvements we do, and basically all of the services that are provided for the citizens that are encompassed in that. And the budget amendment has a lot of great equipment and a lot of great resources for the town's use. We just have to order it 1 year and receive the delivery another year. So we appreciate all the hard work that goes into accounting for all these transactions. Is there any questions about any of these items? I know everyone's had a chance to look at it, or do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the ordinance for the budget amendment that
Okay.
was
I've
presented.
got a motion by Alderman Gorham.
Second.
I have a second by Alderman Penix. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you, Mr. Penix.
In favor.
Thank you, Mr. Apple.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right, item D is consideration of a resolution approving the 2021 general records and 2021 program records retention and disposition schedules. Mr. Swisher?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you have in your packet the general records retention schedule and the program records retention schedule. Those both cover the time periods that we are required to keep records before we dispose of them. And it's in there. You have the summary that goes over that as well. And we have those, the disposition instructions shows on one side, and it shows a record series, what type of record it is on the other side. And then the general statute that gives us the authority to dispose of that or requires us to keep that. So Keith Hooker, myself, and Beth Price, our deputy clerk, we went through that, filled those in, the time frame that we think we need to keep them or dispose of them, make sure that we're meeting the requirements, and we have that before you for approval. If the board approves it and adopts that resolution, we will then send that in to the appropriate agencies.
Thank you. And for your hard work on that, Mr. Swisher, our town attorney, Mr. Powell, for your work on the records retention schedules, and Keith and Beth. Keith and Beth, our town clerks, go to special training to help navigate that, and it is not the most public role that you see that the town clerks are involved in, but a very, very important one to keep our records straight, and to keep the documents for the time period specified, and to properly and timely dispose of the documents that we're no longer needing to keep. So that helps definitely with the amount of real estate the town has to have to timely maintain the files, and also helps to find the information that is needed when it is needed by the public or by the staff of our town. So we appreciate the hard work that went in. In item D, a lot of background and hard work went into creating item D. So we appreciate the time that you took to prepare that properly and bring it to us tonight. So are there any questions, or do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I've got a motion by Alderman Thompson.
Second.
I've got a second by Alderman Gorham. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor?
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. All right, item E is consideration of an agreement with the City of Winston-Salem, the Glen High Road Extension Study. Again, another agenda item that had a lot of background work involved in bringing it to us. Mr. Swisher, we'd like your presentation.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Board, Glen High Road, the extension of that has been on our transportation plan, I guess now for probably 20 years, probably, maybe longer. And the MPO, West Salem MPO, has now agreed to fund 80% of the feasibility study for that extension. Total cost is $53,000. So our portion will be $10,600, and it will be funded through the Caleb's Creek Capital Reserve account. It will not come out of the general fund. That was one of the accounts set up when Caleb's Creek was approved. And the purpose of that account is to fund these type studies. I think the board just approved one not long ago for the study there at Old Salem Road and Tig Lane as well. So this will be the second one down in that area.
Okay, are there any questions or do I have a motion?
So movement.
Okay, motion for approval by Alderman J.R. Gorham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Penix. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. These matters are considered to be routine by the Board of Aldermen and will be enacted by one motion with no separate discussion unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the matter will be removed from the consent agenda and considered under the following item. A, approval of minutes for the June 1 closed session. B, approval of minutes for the June 7 closed session. C, approval of minutes for the June 28 closed session. D, for Scythe County tax refund. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to see A, B, C, or D be removed for further discussion? Seeing none, is there any, Mr. Penix or Mr. Gorham, would you like to see any of these items removed?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple, are there any of the consent agenda items you'd like to see removed?
No, ma'am, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
No, ma'am, I'd motion to approve 3A through D consent agenda.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a second by J.R. Gorham. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Oh, darn it.
Mine's up. I've got my right hand up.
We'll do a roll
I do
call
too.
vote. Okay. Mr. Gorham?
In favor.
Thank you. Y'all are listening. This is great. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
I guess I'm in favor, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Teamwork. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Gorham. All right. We are to item 5, Town Manager's Report.
I have a couple of items, and then the one item, I'll go ahead and cover the one item that is on the agenda. This is the resolution to accept the bid proposal for Whit Station Road Extension. This is the project that North Point Development's doing down off of Macy Grove Road. As you all remember, we entered into a two-party agreement with NCDOT and then the developer to construct the road. The town has no money in it, but the way it's being constructed, the money is passed through. So they had to go through the standard bid process and everything else that way to satisfy DOT. So, you know, the total bid was $1.721 million. DOT will reimburse them $650,000, and then the rest of it they will be responsible for. The low bidder was Sharp Brothers. It's a division of Vasilio and Grogan, and we are recommending awarding the contract to them. So you have in your packet a memo from Ms. Garner to myself, and then also the resolution accepting that low bid.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. I have a motion in favor by Alderman Thompson. I have a second by Alderman J.R. Gorham. Mr. Gorham, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Penix?
In favor.
Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous. Mr. Swisher, do you have anything else?
Yeah, real briefly, update the board. We received our second check from the government, our ARPA funds, in the amount of $3.929 million. We will have that to you most likely in September for a budget amendment to move it over into the ARPA fund so that we can expend that. The board did vote to use that money to for general government operations, so we will move it over so that we can use it for that. That'll be, like I say, probably the second meeting in September, but possibly the first, but most likely the second. Second item, or the third item, I gave all of you a plat last week of the property the town owns at Station 43 on West Mountain Street. How the church has had that surveyed and how they propose to use it. Not heard any feedback, so I'm assuming that everyone was okay with that. There's not a whole lot of ways you can use it anyway. It's a pretty small tract. Again, the town will retain the part there that the fire station is on, and some more acres. It's about a 70-foot setback as well from the building. So I will start working with Providence Church this week on getting those descriptions and getting the deeds, and we can move forward on finalizing that transaction, hopefully in the next probably month or so. Last thing I want to mention, Keith just let me know, he and Beth Price, our other clerk, our deputy clerk, are both now certified master municipal clerks, which, if I'm not mistaken, is probably the highest ranking they can attain.
That is correct.
So we have two of those, which is very good for our town. They both do a great job. Beth works mainly with the planning board and community development on their meetings and so forth. Keith, of course, works with you all, but they both do it from time to time and go back and forth. And they both are responsible for keeping the records retention, as you just voted on the schedules of that. So they both have a part in that, and they are both now certified to the highest level. So I'd like to congratulate them on that achievement. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Swisher. Congratulations, Mr. Hooker.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Ms. Price. And let's give them, Bill and Chris, join with us, and we'll do a round of applause for them.
Thank you.
All right, we are to item 6, matters to be presented by the town attorney, Mr. Powell.
We do have need for having a closed session tonight, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We are to item 7, matters to be presented by the mayor and board of aldermen. Mr. Gorham, do you have anything to present tonight?
No, but I was just wondering, have we started doing any kind of exploratory research on what we might be doing with the Providence Church once they have vacated it and it becomes our property? Any kind of thoughts about what we might want to do with that?
Not much since the initial discussions that I had with the board, but we'll come back to that once it's finalized, and probably go into, I'll talk with each of you individually, and then probably go in as a group and have it formalize it on the agenda at an upcoming meeting. Hopefully, the plan would be hopefully to have it all finalized by the end of August, probably. And then we could have a good plan for it maybe by the end of this year, if not sooner.
Do you have anything else, JR? No. Thank you. Mr. Penix? No, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Apple?
Madam Mayor, in keeping with Mr. Hooker and Ms. Price's outstanding professional achievements, I simply would like to say how proud I am, how sincerely proud I am to be involved with the town of Kernersville, and particularly the level of expertise and education, and more importantly, dedication of all of our departments. It really is a source of pride for I think us as a board and the individuals to working with these fine folks, including the town manager and town attorney and all the department heads. So I just wanted to say that before we moved into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to present today?
I do actually. Two things. First of all, I'd like to say congratulations to Keith and Beth. Well deserved. Second thing is I'd like to ask the chief and Curtis about the brewer's kettle and the noise ordinance. In the last month and a half, I've had 3 calls from people that don't live right next to the brewer's kettle that have informed me or told me that it sounded like they were having a full-on concert at the Brewer's Kettle. I'd just like to inquire as to where we are with that, and if we had complaints, and where, like, basically just where we are, because I've had a lot of bad calls on that.
Alderman Thompson, I'll start, and then Chief Summers, if he's got anything to add, he can add to it, because he might be a little more familiar with it than what I am. But you are correct. We have received several complaints. I know the mayor, Alderman Barrow, and myself receive an email just about every Friday night, and probably every other week on Saturday as well, from Ms. DeFore, who came and spoke, I think, at all of the meetings regarding the Brewer's Kettle and the noise. And she still has complaints regarding the noise. More recently, there have been some other neighbors in the area that have started calling the police department. We have went out, and I think he has now been cited 3 times for a violation of the noise ordinance. I think the decibel levels that he has to stay within are either 60 or 65. I'm not sure. I think it's 60 at night, and he has reached at least 74. I know, and has it been any higher than that? So 74. And he has, I know, 1 court date coming up, and I would assume 2 more after that. And, you know, we get called and we go down there and we continue to cite him. I think it was cited maybe this past weekend, is the most recent. So I know the board, when they adopted the ordinance, I think the board said that it would be revisited in 6 months, I believe. And so it was adopted in April. So that would be October. The board could certainly revisit it sooner than that if they so choose. But I do think that we will continue to receive calls regarding the noise, because it appears as though right now they're not willing to turn it down much. They turn it down, turn it right back up, and so forth. And so I don't know. I mean, and I know Mayor Pro Tem Apple asked me what we could do, you know, short of continuing to go out and cite him. The only other thing I know we can do is change ordinance like we had it initially, and just put a hard stop on that at a certain time. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the outcome of the court case is. A lot of times in those type court cases, I know the judge will continue it for like 90 days, and provided there's no more violations, then they will pretty much throw that one out. Now he's got 3. I don't know if that will be the case or not. I do know that one of the individuals who is having difficulty with the noise is planning on coming to court, trying to speak with the DA, and also maybe trying to be a witness in the case when it comes up. So, you know, right now, probably with it being close to his first court case, my recommendation would be wait and see what the outcome of that is, and then see if he kind of changes the way he does business. And, you know, if not, then you would have time to probably get it on the first agenda for September if the board chooses to do so.
Okay, because and I think originally you said we need to let it go through. If there was an issue, they need to take it to the court and let them handle it and see where we ended up. The issue I'm getting is I'm getting calls from the factory, which is well away from right next door to the Brewer's Kettle. So I hear what you're saying, and I guess we'll just see what happens moving forward and make a decision from there.
Yeah, have you gotten any from I'm asking the chief, Chris, if he's gotten any from the factory. Yeah, we've not gotten any from the factory. Is that what you said you're getting them from the factory?
That's correct. And it's more or less more of like, what's going on? I thought there was a noise ordinance. We can hear it at the factory, and it sounds like there's a concert going on down in the other side of town.
Yeah, I mean, if they're hearing it that clear at the factory, I can only imagine that the lady that's calling two doors up really is hearing it. Yeah, I mean, I would probably wait. I think Ed and I have talked about it and wait and see kind of what happens at the court. You know, the problem with that is I do think they'll probably continue it the first time. So then it's going to be up. Do you want to wait until it's finally settled out? I mean, and who knows, that may take 6 months to a year. Or do you want to go ahead and put something on the agenda for September, October? I mean, I think either one of them at this point, not knowing what they'll do at the court, but his court dates, is it next week, week after?
August 17, I believe.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Pro Tem Apple. His court date's August the 17th. So we won't have a meeting before then anyway. So, you know, we'll know by the September meeting, we will know if something did happen in court, we will know. So if you want us to kind of monitor it and then make, you know, we can decide whether or not to put it on the September agenda or we can put it on the last one for August. I mean, that's certainly the option.
Madam
That
Mayor,
sounds good to me. Sorry,
I
Bill.
have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You know, I'm going to say something. I corporately support what our board did, and that's always going to be the case, gentlemen and Madam Mayor. Once we decide, we have decided, and that's my point. General Gorham and I both learned that in the military, that once a command decision is made, we're all in. I do believe that it bears saying two things. First of all, I believe that our board in good faith gave that particular business owner a break by not making it more restrictive. And I'm not suggesting that, I don't think setting times at this point, frankly, is going to serve any purpose, because I don't think that's going to be complied with either. I don't know whether the town attorney, Ed, I don't know whether you want to answer this question in this meeting or whether you want to answer this in executive session. But one question I'd like to have answered is this. Given the criminal penalty that we incorporated into the ordinance that we passed, is that limited strictly to financial, to fines, or can at some point that become subject to fines and imprisonment? And if you'd rather not answer that, Ed, I didn't give you a heads up before this.
What?
If you'd rather answer, you know,
Mayor
I
Pro
don't know
Tem,
what our options are, but we ought to pursue them to the nth degree.
Mayor Pro Tem Apple, I couldn't understand the last part of your question. You asked, is it only fines, or
is the criminal sanction within the ordinance that we adopted limited to fines, or can it be, is there an option for that to be fine and or imprisonment as imposed by the court?
Mayor Pro Tem Apple, we think it's both, because by North Carolina general statute, it allows for both, but the fine cannot exceed $250. No, I'm sorry, cannot exceed $500. Yeah, and our ordinance is set at $250.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing anything.
We're hearing a lot. Can you hear me now, Bill?
I lost you there for a moment.
Can you hear me now?
I can now. Thank you.
Okay. To answer your question, it includes it can include both a fine and imprisonment, because it follows North Carolina general statute. It maximizes the fine at a maximum of $500. Ours is set by ordinance at $250. So if you want it to be more than that, we would have to change it in our ordinance. You can go up to $500 and we're at $250, but it can include imprisonment as well.
Okay. Well, at some point, if this is in front of the same judge and there are 3 or 4 or 5 instances, that tells me 2 or 3 things. Number one is 250 is not enough to get somebody's attention. And number 2, I think a judge is going to get tired of seeing an individual in court on multiple occasions. I'm not here. I'm sorry. We've got a connection issue.
The one thing, this is Chief Summers, Mr. Apple. I'd say the one thing that kind of throws a monkey wrench into this system is that multiple people can be charged at the establishment. If the individual that was here that was trying to assist in getting the ordinance is at the establishment and in charge that night, he can be charged in violation. However, if he's not there, whoever's managing the operation that night can be charged. So currently right now, I believe we have 2 different people charged, which creates another objective for a judge to realize that the establishment itself has not been charged, but it's the people there running the establishment or in apparent control. And what I would also say is that we have set now hard limits on decibels, so they can't exceed 60, 65, 70 decibels. When people come back and say, well, we're only over by 1, 2, 3, 4 decibels. Well, this isn't like the speed limit where you allow people 3, 4, 5 miles an hour over the speed limit and cut them a break with a verbal warning. We've set hard limits. And so it's hard to explain to a complainant there in the area or the general vicinity of the brewer's kettle why we didn't charge if they're out there and they see our decibel readings that are over the hard limits that are set by this board. So I'd say I would say we have several challenges to overcome with this, not to mention the number of continuances they could possibly get. As the town manager said, this could go on for 6, 8, 12 months before these cases are heard and or a disposition rendered in this case.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see, I'm not hearing anything, and that may be technical. That may be because there's a pause. I don't think anybody, I cannot speak for the entire board, and I don't pretend to, but I don't think anybody is, hell-bent for leather to charge somebody for 1 decibel over the limit. But if it's 14 or 15 and it can be heard at the factory, it's simply too doggone loud. And I would love to see this on the September agenda for review, and I'd love for that review to include consideration of increasing the fine to $500. And the will of the board, I think, needs to be established at that point. I don't think, it may take 6 months or a year to prosecute the cases that are out there, but at some point, we've got to get somebody's attention. And I agree with the board's conclusion that the decibel level limits alone should suffice. But if they're not, we need to, I think, assert some progressive discipline here, no matter who it is. We need to assert some progressive discipline until we find the magic formula.
And I agree with Alderman Apple. It sounds like what we decided upon is not being taken like it should have been.
I agree with that, Chris.
Mr. Apple, you may want to close your microphone if you finish speaking.
Madam Mayor, I'm not hearing anything for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you.
Now I heard you just then.
I think that, Mr. Apple, I think you may be getting background noise.
Yes.
And
Let me step
if you
outside
close your
here because
microphone,
I'm in.
If you close your microphone, that may eliminate it, and then you may be able to hear a little easier.
Kind of sounds like you're at a concert, Bill.
I felt like I need to order dinner.
I'm in Starbucks and somebody just ordered something with ice in it. So that's the source of the noise.
Check the noise level there, but see what the decibel is there, Bill.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to pay any attention to it.
Madam Mayor, that's all I have. Thank you, Curtis, for the discussion.
Certainly, and I think what I heard is put it on the agenda for September. Is that correct, Mayor Pro Tem Apple?
Yes, sir. That's what I'd like to see. Now, if the board feels differently, I respect my colleagues on that. But it seems to me we haven't found the formula yet, and I think we don't need to wait a year to try to do that for these people.
And I agree. I would just like to see, I'd like to see the complaints through the court system to see where he ends up or where they end up, to make sure that when we do decide to discuss this, that we know what the outcome was for all three complaints he already had.
I concur.
Okay, is there anything else before we have our closed session? Mr. Gorham, if you'd like to make a motion.
Madam Mayor, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, I move that the board go into closed session to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged and pursuant to A5 regarding a contract concerning the purchase of real estate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll say that the second came in at exactly the same time, but I'll say it was Alderman Penix. So Alderman Gorham with the motion, Alderman Penix with the second, and like everything else, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Gorham?
In favor.
Mr. Penix? Thank you. Mr. Apple?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson?
In favor. Thank you.
Thank you. This board is now in closed session. Good evening and welcome back to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Is there any further business before the board this evening? If not, I'd like to wish everybody, as we wind down the summer and get ready for back to school, a safe and healthy 2022-23 school year. To Superintendent McManus, the principals, teachers, bus drivers, school staff, and students who are busy getting ready to go back to school, we wish you a great experience this coming school year. And I especially want to thank the Kernersville Police Department for the efforts over the summer to continue to be ready for all the challenges that the new school year brings, and wish all of our SROs well as we start the new school year just in a few weeks. If that is all, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Got a motion by Alderman J.R. Gorham. I have a second by Alderman Thompson. And we'll do a roll call vote for adjournment. Mr. Gorham? In favor? Mr. Penix?
In favor.
In favor? Mr. Apple?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson? All right. It's unanimous, and so this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Nice job, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.